bring in our chief medical correspondent, Dr. Sanjay Gupta. Now, Sanjay, there's been some significant developments on the alleged link between autism and childhood vaccines. What happened today?
There are 3 test cases out there, Wolf, that sort of a special court ruled on today, trying to establish whether or not there is a link between certain vaccines, childhood vaccines, the MMR vaccine in particular, and autism. This was a ruling that a lot of people were waiting for some time. The answer came back as no, no, no on all 3 of those test cases. No link was established.
About 20% of children with autism will regress between often the first and second birthday. So statistically, it has to happen where some children will get a vaccine, they will have been fine, they get the vaccine, then they're not fine anymore.
Became paralyzed and overwhelmed and stuck, and I believed that I couldn't do anything, and I was a loser dad.
I heard the word autism. He didn't say it directly to me. I actually heard him on the phone saying, "Hold my calls, I'm working with a child with autism."
I saw my normal, healthy, developing child start to lose all of his language, all of his contact with the world. He no longer responded to his name. He no longer recognized his parents.
I want it to go away. I really do. You know, we have just caused so much injury to a whole generation of children.
I feel guilty that I let it happen. I feel like my job as his mother was to protect him, and really what I did harmed him. You know, I thought I was doing the right thing, but I wasn't.
Regressive autism is that your child does develop typically, and he does look like this true, perfect little thing. And then all of a sudden you wake up and they're gone.
You kind of lose touch with the real world because most people don't want to be around your kid.
There's a death of what you wanted for your child and what you thought your child was.
Where's your nose?
Mommy, 5.
I got that diagnosis, and I'm looking at my child, and he's gone. Ethan was very physically affected. He was one of those kids with low muscle tone and mitochondrial signs.
Ethan! Ethan Spencer! Knock, 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 knock. Cup, 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 cup.
I didn't think there was anything that I could do. And then when I started realizing that I could do something, then my eye focused on what I wanted. And that was a tremendous change for me. So when I saw that I wanted a recovered kid, that's all I saw.
Robert could yell or scream for 45 minutes straight and not stop. There was times he would crawl out of his car seat, I'd have to pull over on the side of the road, and he would be doing flips on my body, just screaming, just rages that you would not believe. I would have people stopping and writing my license number down. Anyway, you know, it's like you're hurting your kid, but they didn't know what I would go through. I could not bathe my son I'd have to close my windows and my doors in my house because I really thought they're going to turn me into the social workers and think we are like burning the kid or doing something. It just got to the point where we stopped going out to places. It was too hard. As a mother, you don't give up hope. Doctors are not gods. They can't decide how my son, there's a thing with me, it's like, okay, I have a problem here now, let's just go on and let's fix it. So I just believed there was something I could do for my child.
I remember this one especially, they recognized their body parts. And we thought, are they all geniuses? At 2 or 2.5, they know their knees and their shoulders. We couldn't fathom like when Jackson would know his body parts. He didn't even know where he was. Life is good job. Like, even though he was our first kid, we realized this may not be normal. You know, staring at your hand for 30 seconds or a minute or even 2 minutes, you know, might be a bit much. And then, you know, spinning things at like 9 months for like an hour. I think one time we watched like The Sopranos and we didn't say anything. He just spun things for an hour and we thought, you know what?
A light went off.
Something's up.
For
so there were those moments, but then there was the official moment when a professional said that he had autism.
She said that your son is mentally retarded and that there's no hope for your son. That's what she said.
I was in a little bit of denial at first. You know, you actually don't want to believe that. But the signs were there. We knew he wasn't developing the way his brother, for example, was developing, or how my daughter was developing as a child. So we knew something was wrong.
The fits of violence lasted until Jonathan was put on medication. The psychiatrist said that this was the best course of action for Jonathan so that he wouldn't harm himself and other children.
We went along with whatever the doctor told us to do for him, which was, of course, put him on medicine.
He didn't speak too much. He just walked around like a zombie. It was a way that they thought Jonathan should be, to be calm, medicate him. Jonathan had told me one day, Mom, I want to kill myself. And I looked at him, I said, Jonathan, what did you just say? I went back to the psychiatrist and he said, oh, your son is depressed now, he should be on Ritalin. At that time, Jose and I walked out of his office. We looked at each other and we said, enough, enough.
Drew actually was developing typically, you know, so, and I really kept a close eye on him because of what was going on with Nick. And Drew just reverted. He lost skills. He was saying words from picture books, and he was a little over 2. He was a little younger when he got the diagnosis because, you know, I was looking out for it. So, you know, took him to the same neurologist and had the same diagnosis. And, you know, it's devastating. It's devastating, yeah, you know. Because you go through it with one child, and then for it to happen with the second child, it's just, you know, what's going on? You want more? Yeah. Here you go. It's hard because they're nonverbal, and that's the most frustrating thing for me. You know, not getting to know them. You know, I want for them to be able to tell me what they want, what they like, what they don't like. It's not just about, you know, being like everybody else or, you know, being able to go to school and go to a typical class. And it's not just about that for me. I really want to know who they are, what they like, what they don't like. But they're happy, you know, and they're healthy. And so far, so good. That's the best I can go on.
Language was lost. He drooled incessantly. He had extremely low muscle tone. Diarrhea was our first major red flag. We took off his diaper one summer day, and every 5 minutes, bright yellow liquid. He just stooled 30 times a day, just liquid. Sensory issues, no tags, no haircuts, no trying on shoes. We couldn't leave the house. Transitions were horrible. To get him from the house in clothes to the car seat took 30 minutes, screaming the whole time, just completely, very non-compliant.
Baxter, to give the baby a kiss?
They sat us down at a table and tried to manage our expectations. Don't expect him to talk. Don't expect him to grow up and get married and live a life. This is what the professionals were telling us. It was a dark time, the time of diagnosis. I just wanted anything but that. Anything but that.
How about a gummy? You sure?
When it actually became true to me, I got angry, and it lit a fire under me, and I started researching.
An epidemic of autism is plaguing America. Our children among the most chronically ill and disabled. Autism is a devastating neurological and biological disorder.
I'm home, sweetie.
It is typically diagnosed in children between 18 months and 5 years of age. Some children are severely affected. They can't speak, they require constant one-on-one care, and are never able to live on their own.
They'll do this for hours.
Repetitive behavior, violent tantrums, and a lack of eye contact are a few of the many symptoms. Doctors and other experts now believe a multitude of factors cause autism. Mercury-based preservatives, live viruses, and other agents in vaccines are known culprits, but a host of other toxins are blamed as well.
There's a common pattern happening with children with neurodevelopmental disorders, including those children who have autism, and that is that their brains are being poisoned. Their immune systems and their nervous systems are incapacitated by the degree and the intensity of the information, that is the food, the water, the air, the skincare products, the amount and intensity of stimulation through their nervous systems, and the toxins that we're delivering past their skin through injections with vaccinations. All of this information, all of this stimulation is overwhelming their immune and nervous systems, and they are being poisoned. Poisoned to the point where their bodies are losing the capacity to handle what they're exposed to and to be able to detoxify sufficiently enough so that they can have normal brain, normal immune, and normal nervous system function.
All of the toxins, chemicals, allergens in our environment. That's making not only their brains, but their guts and their immune system sick.
It's about the worst parts of human nature gone awry, and our lack of ability to realize what is important. You know, that our children even telling us that we are sick, that the environment is toxic, that we're doing the wrong things. They're telling us. They could not tell us any louder than not speaking. But yet we don't want to listen to them. We just want to blame and point and separate, and it's tragic. It's tragic what's going on. It is the worst parts of human nature expressed past the point of our best resource on the planet being damaged.
An estimated 1.2 billion pounds of pesticides are used on our commercially grown and produced foods each year in the United States. Consuming a diet of chemically treated foods laced with neurotoxic herbicides and fertilizers has shown to affect the development of the brain, the nervous system, and the immune system.
In this generation, in this very, very toxic environment, it takes less and less genetic vulnerability for a child to become ill. And I think it only stands to reason that the children are going to be the first to suffer the consequences of a poisoned environment because their brains are still developing and their nervous system is much more vulnerable than ours would be as adults.
Growing evidence points to prenatal triggers of autism, including underlying chronic infections, viruses, and heavy metals passed from mother to unborn child.
The big things for Ethan was he was born with eczema. Moms can have infections that are passed on, and these infections are involved a lot of times in these kids.
Bless you.
So when I go back and I see day one of life and I see eczema all over his body, he actually had eczema before day one of his life. So he had it, you know, during gestation.
We worry that our patients have a toxic burden at birth because we've done testing on the mothers as well. And the mothers have a toxic burden that they're passing on to their children during the 9 months in the womb.
Today, 1 out of every 6 women of childbearing age is thought to have mercury levels already in their body that could cause neurological damage to their unborn children. And I know we do everything we can to be healthy when we get ready to have a child, and I think a lot of people aren't aware of mercury. It's not on the radar screen like lead is on the radar screen, but it's actually much more toxic.
When I move his arm, there's some resistance there, and there's nothing.
There's much debate over the causes of autism. Some attribute the rise to an increased awareness of the condition and better diagnosis by their pediatricians.
Autism, the rise is because of better diagnosis, more awareness. I'm sorry, more awareness, and then now, so my kid with autism was in the closet before all of a sudden. Now he's out. I have autism and I'm proud, you know, count me in. Like that's the reality. You know, the fastest growing genetic condition is 1% per 100 years. So if you go and ask a school teacher 25 years ago, is there a 0.25% more autism in your classroom? And you just poll the teachers, you find your answer.
As an older physician, I take it as a personal insult that they're implying that in the 80s, before we had all these CAT scans, by the way, we had them, but before we had all this new technology, we didn't notice that these children were autistic. I mean, 60% of them don't speak, but they were walking around in the classrooms and we didn't notice it, right? And not only that, but this has been going on through all the generations, so there should be as many 50-year-old autistics as there are 30-year-old autistics as there are 10-year-old autistics. Only they can't find what's called the hidden horde. Nobody can find the 50-year-old autistics because there were so few you could count them on one hand. So there's clearly an epidemic.
To give you some perspective on this, when I was a resident, it was 1 in 10,000 children. And the latest figures are 1 in 150 children in this country have an autistic spectrum disorder.
In some of the states, like New Jersey, it's now exceeding 1 in 100. When it's all settled and everybody gets counted, the rate is going to be between 1 in 10 and 1 in 30. Certainly no lower than 1 in 50.
1 in 5 children are now in some form of special education. This is the bigger problem. These are children whose levels of poisoning may be more subtle and maybe a little bit more diminished. And these are the children that are increasing in number and a greater problem for our society, both in the educational system and the financial system. These families are running all over the place to get them to learn and speak and maintain eye contact and interact in a way that appears that they're socially and academically appropriate. This is a huge problem.
There's something that has changed in those last 2 decades that has caused the tremendous rise. It's not just us as physicians being better diagnosticians. Autism is a clinical disease. We're not necessarily better at making those types of diagnoses than we were 20 years ago. So something else has changed, and we need to look at what's changed.
Boys are much more dramatically affected than girls. Many more. 4 boys to every girl gets autism. 8 boys to every girl becomes Asperger's or some other neurological symptom.
If anybody goes into our school system today, you look everywhere. Our children learn differently. I think teachers are getting a bad rap that they're not educating our children, but our children learn totally differently than the way they used to 10 or 20 years ago. So we really have to address this issue head on. Boys are more susceptible to a lot of these environmental toxicants like mercury, and we're already seeing that girls are outpacing boys in college. They're starting classes now where they're separating girls and boys because they learn differently, and nobody's really paying attention to a lot of this, and it's hugely important. Our children just aren't healthy anymore, and we've got to ask why.
If 1% of those children were all of a sudden kidnapped, we'd drop everything as a society to find those kids. But it hasn't hit a sense of urgency or crisis. When the government wants to fund good science, when industry wants to fund good science, it's definitely capable of doing that. We did it with the Manhattan Project, with NASA and our race to the moon, with the SARS epidemic, with TB, eliminating smallpox. We've done this over and over and over again, even preparing for bird flu. But the government's sense of urgency has not yet kicked in to resolve this autism crisis. I am fairly convinced the reason is they just cannot politically look at the safety of vaccines because too much is at stake.
"40 million children were injected with mercury-containing vaccines in the 1990s.
There are, as you've had others tell you, many potentially harmful ingredients in vaccines. However, there's one ingredient that stands out so far above all the others that it's the one that we totally look at, and that is thimerosal.
Thimerosal is ethyl mercury. It's been in vaccines for over 60 years. The vaccine manufacturers understand that the vaccines may become contaminated during the manufacturing process. They use thimerosal to not decontaminate new growth, but to decontaminate growth that has already occurred from the manufacturing process. So the thimerosal, ethyl mercury, is a toxin to cell replication.
Harvard University has published showing that there's significantly more mercury in the brains of autistic than normal kids, and also that the mercury in the brain of autistic correlates with the areas that see the most damage induced by mercury.
So what we're having here is a load of data produced by the opposition that says mercury is retained by children. It is mostly retained and more adamantly retained by boys, and boys are the ones that have most of the neurodevelopmental problems in this country and in other countries also.
This footage from the University of Calgary demonstrates the degenerative effects of mercury on brain neurons. Very low concentrations of mercury were added to the culture medium for 20 minutes. Over the next 30 minutes, the neurite membrane underwent rapid degeneration, leaving behind the denuded neurofibrils seen here. These findings reveal important visual evidence to how mercury causes neurodegeneration.
When we talk about mercury, unlike most poisons, we're talking about something in parts per billion that's poisonous acutely to human neurons. Something like lead is an example. That's in parts per million, 100 parts per million, 500 parts per million. Mercury is so toxic that at less than 1 part per billion, which is something that's so small you can't even imagine it.
Roughly, if you go to your salt shaker and you take 1 grain of salt and you throw the grain of salt in the average backyard swimming pool, that's 1 part per billion. You can swim in that swimming pool if you put that much, almost anything else in, but it's deadly with mercury. Mercury is one of the most toxic substances known to man.
By 2009, the Center for Disease Control and Prevention and the American Academy of Pediatrics recommended a total of 69 doses of 16 vaccines to be given to children in the United States. The EPA guidelines indicate a child would have to weigh 550 pounds to safely process the mercury in one typical shot. That's 187 times the EPA daily exposure limit.
We've expanded the national immunization program many-fold in the last couple of decades. And in the process, we're basically running a massive experiment on the healthy development of children. It's an experiment that's never been tested, and one which is being managed by the very same people whose job it is to expand the program. So I think that's one possible answer to why so many children are sick, is that there are just plain too many vaccines.
In the last 25 years, as we've more than doubled the numbers of vaccines that we give our young children, we've seen a doubling of learning disabilities, doubling of attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, a doubling of asthma, a tripling of diabetes, and a 600% or more increase in autism in every state.
The autism rate went up in all 50 states at the same time. It had to go up in Alaska, Hawaii, California, Florida, Maine, Nebraska, and every other state. And there is only one toxic exposure that fits that bill, and that's the CDC mandated vaccine program.
This includes hepatitis B, which is given to newborns within the first 24 hours of life.
Why is it that we're immunizing the kids at birth? At birth, because of the fact that we're concerned about that there may become IV drug abusers and prostitutes. It's ridiculous. It's absolutely ridiculous, and it's a function of the drug companies being able to have a great cash cow to be able to develop these things and move forward.
Just had the birth, was 8 pounds 2 ounces, and he's got 10 fingers, 10 toes, and looking great. There's little Baxter, looking good.
Normal pregnancy, he developed completely normally. 2 months of age, he got 3 shots, and all 3 had thimerosal.
His mommy took him to the doctors, and he had to get some shots. He wants you to be healthy, so you have some nice shots there.
Within 48 hours, developed acute pyelonephritis, which is a kidney infection. With all subsequent testing, VCUG, all of that revealed they couldn't figure out why he got that. And every time he was subsequently vaccinated, he was ill. And he received the MMR, and he fell off the planet.
He had his next round of vaccinations, and after that, every word that he had was gone. He didn't even realize when I would leave the room, when I would come in the room. We had no eye contact. He was running around like a madman.
Approximately 12 months, Jonathan received a hepatitis B vaccination. He had fever after the vaccination, and Jonathan lost all his speech. He used to say 2 or 3 words, that stopped. Jonathan used to hum and sing, that stopped. And all you would see was a blank look, a dazed look over Jonathan's face, no smiling, no emotion, just a blank stare. It seemed like it wasn't our child anymore.
Adam, Scott, Adam, Adam.
When he was diagnosed, there wasn't a lot out there. And that was after years of seeing him regress, lose his speech, start becoming very aggressive.
Adam, it's time to put the Game Boy down and get dressed.
Of course.
If he's not getting his own way, he can have a major meltdown.
When he was born, he needed many tests. And so he was constantly on antibiotics to avoid infection. He had brain inflammation that he needed surgery for, where they took bone out of his skull and his spine to give his brain more room. He has, I feel like, just global health issues. And he had surgery at 3 months old on his kidneys. So while he had surgery on a major organ, and while he was on, morphine and painkillers and more antibiotics, he was getting vaccinated. And basically his entire immune system was destroyed.
I know with my own children, they developed very high fevers, very severe diarrhea, and they were extremely irritable after their vaccines. At the time, I just thought, well, babies get fevers, and this is pretty unusual, but I was reassured that these things happen, it'll just, fade away. But for my children, it absolutely did not fade away. They developed not only inflammation in their bowel and chronic inflammatory bowel disease from that point on, but I believe inflammation in their brain as well.
He got the MMR and completely changed. He went right into chronic diarrhea. He had diarrhea for 5 straight years.
Certain children may not have the vulnerabilities when they're vaccinated to develop autism or a really serious autoimmune disease. Some of their problems may be more subtle. They may be more likely to get asthma or eczema or inflammatory bowel disease or multiple sclerosis or ADD, ADHD. These are all chronic conditions that we like to lump into categories that we can then find drugs for. But we in the population need to understand that we might be creating these illnesses, that all of these inflammatory illnesses are merely the ways in which our children express the dysfunction of their immune and nervous systems at the hands of multiple factors, one of which may include the injection of toxic ingredients from vaccines.
Hi, Kate. How are you?
We have never, ever validated the safety of the vaccine schedule as a whole. People looked at bits and pieces of it at one vaccine at a time. They do clinical trials on children when they introduce a new vaccine, but there's only 3 weeks of follow-up. So they've never followed these children pre or post-market to find out if there is a chronic long-term effect that may be adverse. So any new drug, any vaccine has to be presumed unsafe until it's proven safe. And what we now have come to realize is that the vaccine schedule as a whole has never been proven safe. So whether it turns out the Prevnar or the aluminum or MMR or the mercury is causing damage, the industry and the government never would have known that because they did not look. That makes the vaccine schedule an unethical social experiment in mass immunization, illegal under the Nuremberg and Helsinki codes. And this may have profound implications for society.
So what the public is then told is that the vaccines are safe, but the short-term and the long-term studies have never been done to properly evaluate the safety of not only the individual ingredients, and not only the interaction of the ingredients, but the interaction of multiple vaccines when given together in a child of any age.
When I was at the NIH, we were more concerned on what are we doing to get thimerosal out of vaccines. That was our focus as a committee. What have we done? What is the level of evidence? We wanted to have, Congressman Burton wrote Secretary Shalala and asked her to recall all thimerosal-containing vaccines that infants were exposed to, and she refused. They said that if they issued a recall, that the industry would sue the FDA, and therefore they would not do that.
When you look at the Simpsonwood Conference in Norcross, Georgia, which included leaders from the WHO, the FDA, the CDC, the American Academy of Pediatrics, and leading scientists. They looked at data from the Vaccine Safety Data Link that directly showed a link between the development of neurodevelopmental disorders and the administration of mercury-containing vaccines.
Somebody provided me with the Simpsonwood memo. Simpsonwood was the transcripts of a secret meeting that was held between CDC and representatives of the vaccine industry, in which they reviewed a report that CDC had ordered, the Verstraeten study, of the 100,000 children in the United States Vaccine Safety Database.
There was clear evidence between the injection of children with mercury-containing vaccines and the development of neurodevelopmental disorders in children.
Which they are talking about the undeniability of the connection between autism and thimerosal, the impossibility of massaging the data further in order to try to eliminate those signals. That's what they spend the first 2 hours. The rest of the meeting they spend talking about how do we hide this from the press, from the public, and what they call the predatory bar.
The participants were told that the information was embargoed, that they were not allowed to discuss this with the public. And there was no question, if you look at the comments, that they knew this information would have a significant impact on the vaccine program, both domestically and worldwide. And one of the participants said, you know, until we get this straightened out, I do not want my grandson to have thimerosal in their vaccines.
And these data were covered up. The data from this conference was specifically kept from the public because the scientists and the leaders who were at that conference knew that if this information got out to the public, it would stop the vaccine program in its track.
And then over a period of years, they processed the data, they excluded some populations. There are a lot of things that you can do with a large sample epidemiology study. And over time, with each successive iteration, they made that signal smaller and smaller so that by the time they published the findings, they said, well, geez, there's a little bit of a signal here, but it's probably just random chance.
That's fraud. It is fraud in science, and there are federal laws against that, and there are certainly ethical laws against that within the world of science. And the Simpsonwood showed that the doctors involved, the scientists involved in this community, were more worried about preserving the policies of immunization, of protecting the industry, than they were about whether or not children were being harmed. And that, to me, is an abomination. You know, we have a public health system that is supposed to protect the public. And what we found is they were more protecting their own policies, and they were all worried about making sure that they were not going to be found at fault.
We saw what they saw at the very beginning. We saw what they published at the end. And that gap is what makes many of us so upset, because it looks to us like they were tampering with the evidence, and that they had it, they knew it, and they ended up publishing a conclusion that hid the real data, and that's a real shame.
This was a moment where the government could have come clean, that the government could have immediately recalled all vaccine with thimerosal in it. They could have taken proactive steps, and by covering this up, not only were they hiding the truth, but they were allowing affected children to go untreated and for more children to be affected.
What we need to do is show parents that very important information has been covered up.
I just want to start by asking the CDC one question. How stupid do you think we are? I made a movie about two dumb guys, but nobody's this stupid.
Turn around and face the media, please, and I'll join you and show them and show the world the reason we're here today. These children are trying so hard to show us how to live in a cleaner world. These kids are here for a reason, to teach us to eat better, clean up the air, get rid of toxins, because they can't survive. I know, I really do know that this is their main purpose, and I pray that we all start to wake up and collectively change this world into the new world our kids are working so hard to create.
If we've learned anything from Hurricane Katrina, it's that we can't always rely on government agencies to do the right thing. Oftentimes, they will avoid the obvious cause of a problem if the solution is inconvenient. And I certainly wouldn't trust the drug companies to regulate themselves.
I read these studies, and I saw studies that weren't even good for it. Wasn't even high-quality fraud. You see the press here and all there, not a single member of this press corps, I can guarantee you, has ever read any of those studies. It has not happened. What they read was the CDC's description of those studies, which has nothing to do with what's in the studies. And ultimately, the American press has completely let down our democracy.
We have, as a nation, gotten used to quick sound bites. We have 24-hour news on 24 stations. So they go to organizations that put together the news stories for them. The NIH on its website, and most government agencies now on their websites have prepackaged stories put together. The industry does the same thing. The pharmaceutical industry puts together stories for the industry to run so that any of the networks can pick up a story on immunization that's been put together by the people who have a specific opinion. And reporters are simply being lazy. They're not doing their job. They're taking for granted that somebody from the government's being honest with them. And how many times have we seen somebody from the government have an opinion or a position that turned out to be wrong?
"30 years ago, I was involved in a serious investigation of vaccines, and I called various media people, including the New York Times, with evidence that there was a serious vaccine regulation problem in the United States. And the guy from the New York Times said, I've looked into my files, and I don't see any stories saying there's a serious regulatory problem. So as far as I'm concerned, there's no serious regulatory problem." We kept working away, and we had a lot of help from people inside the government, and ended up with hearings by Senator Ribicoff that caused the agency at NIH that regulated vaccines to be closed down, caused the Attorney General to rule that it had been violating the Food and Drug Law for the past 30 years. That was 30 years ago. Caused a situation in which it laid the groundwork for proving that the swine flu vaccine was in fact unsafe, ineffective, and in my opinion, a fraud. All of that was done in spite of the fact that the press systematically said, we don't see any problem in vaccines. The very thing they're saying now.
There was a recent study in 2008 looking at the relationship between children who had gastrointestinal symptoms and autism, and those children who just had gastrointestinal symptoms, to identify whether or not the measles vaccine was related to their development of autism. Now, this was a very small sample size. 25 of the children were in the study group, 13 were in the control group. They made it out to be that this study was definitive evidence that there is no link between vaccines and autism. Now, anyone who knows anything about statistics and studies knows that 38 children is not a sufficient number of children to study to make any definitive conclusions about. And you also have to look at who did the study, and those bits of information don't come out into the public. Unfortunately, what happens is pediatricians and family docs hear the literature and take it as gospel, and then start reporting to parents all over the place that indeed there are no worries about the relationship between the development of autism and the administration of vaccines. But the docs aren't looking at the studies. And unfortunately, what happens in our society is if there's a select group that makes something a truth and enough people hear about it, then a lot of people are going to believe that it's true without actually investigating for themselves.
The argument that these ideas about vaccines are based on science is actually not a sound argument. Most of the research that's done on vaccines is paid for by people who are either manufacturing or selling vaccines. These people are biased in what they do.
All of the safety studies done on vaccines are done by the companies that manufacture the vaccines. The approval of the safety and the approval of the administration of these vaccines is most often done by the employees of the vaccine manufacturers as well. This is a huge conflict of interest. If we want to understand whether these vaccines are safe, we need to have independent researchers looking at these studies and doing them without the financial and the medical interests that are influencing the decision making.
The American Academy of Pediatrics is the union of pediatricians. And one of the things I think you learn about unions is that their job is to advocate for the livelihood of their members. And I think pediatricians are by and large wonderful people. They get into the business of pediatrics because they want to help children and make them healthier. It's a very difficult thing for most pediatricians to come to grips with the idea, even the suggestion, that their care of children may have caused more harm than good.
The CDC and the FDA and even the NIH continue to say there's no evidence of harm because they are only focusing on the epidemiological studies that the CDC funded. They are not looking at the studies out of MIT and out of Columbia, the studies that Dr. Haley has done. They have completely ignored the hard science, which to me is an absurd thing because at the NIH in the 90s when I was there, you only looked at the hard science. Epidemiology was something that was not given the high priority that is given today in this discussion.
This whole process is designed specifically to make a market for vaccines. And behind it all is Merck Sharp and Dohme as one of the major forces, Merck now, who's gotten hundreds of millions of dollars from the federal government to create vaccine production, distribution, and collect billions of dollars in selling those products. No one who works for a company should be allowed to be on those committees. No one who works for an agency that distributes those vaccines should be allowed to be on those committees. And when the federal agencies are there, they should be counterbalanced by people who are in fact seriously concerned about vaccine safety.
People who are elected to office, who are selected to committees, are often given donations for their campaigns, are often given salaries by the companies that have a vested interest in policies and legislation being passed that mandates vaccines to our children. The public doesn't want to believe this, but we need to, because there is a conflict of interest, because many of the legislators and many of the scientists who are operating supposedly in our best interest are being given money, either in campaigns or in salaries, to support the continuation of the vaccine program.
We had a lot of conversation at the committee level with doctors who were doing research in vaccine injury. Everyone who came before our committee and testified in a public forum lost their NIH funding. Many of them had to, change academic institutions, and their funding dried up. That's an important conversation that really has not taken place in the public yet.
So what you see in the face of good science and rigorous research and courageous people is that the right kind of scientific behavior is punished. And by contrast, the people that are out there feeding the propaganda machine with sloppily designed studies that exonerate mercury, that exonerate vaccines, that exonerate the fact that there's even an epidemic, the people that do that work, I can tell you, that's horrible work. It's poorly designed, it's sloppy. Many of them fall apart on even the flimsiest inspection. Those kinds of people get more grants, they get promotions, they get invited to conferences, they get rewarded for doing the wrong thing.
The increasing concern about ethyl mercury led to the removal of thimerosal from most childhood vaccines in 1999 to 2001. However, these vaccines still contain trace amounts of thimerosal, which is stated on the CDC's own website.
When they say there are only trace amounts of mercury, Most people don't know that those trace amounts are above toxic levels for drinking water.
We've introduced the routine use of mercury-containing influenza vaccines to young children in the first year of life, 2 shots, and we recommend it for all pregnant women. That's an amazing recommendation. I don't recommend flu shots with or without thimerosal because I'm from the OBGYN world. We tell our pregnant women, we're not sure anything is safe, let's do nothing. And yet they give them influenza shots. You know, I've done 40,000 women I take a history on that I've done amniocentesis and counseling on. Pregnant women very rarely get influenza. I mean, occasionally, but very rarely. We tell them not to take an aspirin if they can help it. But they're going to give them influenza, which if you look up in the PDR, the physician's death reference, is a Class C drug. That means its safety has never been tested, forget about the mercury, never been tested in pregnancy. We're recommending it for all pregnant women. This is beyond belief.
The members of this legislature were told, if you stop mandatory vaccine, you're going to see epidemics like measles come back again. Really? Did you actually do your homework? Well, I did. Here are the actual government statistics from 1838 to when the vaccines were implemented in 1967. High back then, dropping. Guess what? We had better sanitation. We had cleaner water. We were pasteurizing milk. We had public health measures. And by the time the vaccines was introduced, it was 98% gone. Let your voices be heard. Let the governor know you count.
We have a lawsuit in federal court, not for any money, but asking the federal court to order the FDA to either remove thimerosal or to show their safety testing. And their answer has been, they have no safety testing, but it's within their prerogative to violate the rules. Julie Gerberdine gets up and says, you know, there are no studies that have ever shown thimerosal has ever caused damage in tissue culture, humans, people, anything, animals. Anybody who has a computer can go on PubMed, which is the free access to the National Library of Medicine. Type in the word thimerosal, see what you get. I get 1,300 articles, almost all of which said it damaged my frogs, my people, by the way, it is people. There were 11 babies that had thimerosal put on their umbilical stumps to keep them sterile. 9 of them died and 2 of them were brain damaged.
When parents go to doctors, the doctors scare the parents into believing that somehow their children who are not vaccinated are carrying some secret organism, some secret virus or bacteria that no one else has in the community. And if they don't vaccinate their children, that somehow their children carrying those special viruses and bacteria are going to infect those children who are vaccinated. Well, number one, if a child is vaccinated and a parent believes that the vaccines are safe and effective, then why are they afraid? Why are they afraid that their children are not protected? And number two, all children and all adults breathe the same air, are living in the same community, and are exposed to the same numbers of viruses and bacteria. So children who are not vaccinated are at no greater risk of carrying or harboring any of the vaccine preventable diseases than children who are vaccinated. This is an unfortunate myth that keeps getting passed down one after another.
There's tremendous pressure on a news reporter not to really cover the mercury side of this issue. And the reason is that if you attack, as a media person, the CDC, the FDA, you're killing the golden goose, so to speak, because most of their stories come from those people, and if you offend them, you're not going to be able to talk to them again. So there's a certain amount of non-coverage bias, particularly among the big station networks that really rely on the CDC and the FDA.
It's an impossible challenge to the AMA to be completely unbiased. If you have a company, you know, Merck or Wyeth or any of the large pharmaceutical companies buying 10 or 12 pages of advertising from you, and you're about to have a research study published that has a negative outcome for one of their top money makers, How do you do that and not lose your advertising? That's an impossible situation that they face every day. So studies that should get published don't get published. You oftentimes don't ever see the negative studies get published because nobody wants to lose their advertising. You also have relationships with pharmaceutical companies actually having ghostwriters do the writing and then have somebody who's in academia put their name on the study. This is a violation of scientific ethics and is just now beginning to come out. The AMA and the New England Journal of Medicine and others are faced with challenges. You know, the New England Journal of Medicine about 8 years ago had to change their editorial publication policies because they could no longer find individuals to write editorial reviews who didn't have financial ties to the industry. So they changed their rules.
So you can't even trust journal articles anymore unless you can verify that they are truly independent. You have to actually look up who these people are who write these articles. Are they on the payroll of pharmaceutical companies? Are they getting unrestricted grants?
The flu vaccine became an important item, again produced by Merck, because it was the only vaccine that you took annually. All other vaccines you took once or twice in your life. The flu vaccine was a great cash cow because you took it every year. I met with Alexander Langmuir, who was the founder of CDC. He at that time was an emeritus professor at Harvard University, and discussed the flu vaccine with him. He was at that time about a little over 70. He said, I would not take the flu vaccine. My wife does not take the flu vaccine. No one should take the flu vaccine. And in fact, when I was head of CDC, I wanted to make that as a public statement, and I refused to say that you should take the flu vaccine. That's why I'm now a professor at Harvard. He got fired for that. That was what he told me.
That flu shot by itself would be enough to potentially cause an autism epidemic. We must get it out of the flu shot. And virtually 100% of the flu shots given to pregnant women have mercury.
Hi, how are you?
Okay.
Mercury in childhood vaccines is not the only toxic ingredient. Aluminum is another potent toxin present in vaccines. Mercury and aluminum together can exacerbate metal toxicity in a child and trigger autoimmune reactions.
In our studies, when we took neurons in culture and treated them with 50 nanomolar, which is an incredibly low amount of mercury, where they would die in 24 hours, you would see a slow death rate of the neurons with thimerosal alone. If we added the amount of aluminum in the vaccine at that time to that thimerosal, we would see a 60% increase in the death of neurons at about 12 hours. So aluminum enhances the toxicity of thimerosal. And this is not just our find. This is something that was reported many years ago, that thimerosal, when it reacted with aluminum, became much more toxic.
We'd have to really go back and look at how much we've ignored decades of observation, decades of experience, and decades of science that have been done but have been ignored.
Just taking out thimerosal is not going to change that sequence of events. So we have to go back to square one and look at the whole vaccine program, what we're doing, all the contents of these vaccines. It's a bigger picture than just that of thimerosal toxicity.
The evidence is blood, it's urine, it's feces, it's hair, it's brain. It's pretty much anywhere you want to look. If you're an honest person looking at this, you will seek and you will find the answer, and it is mercury.
No one goes into pediatrics wanting to hurt children. I mean, it's a horrible, horrible realization when you realize that what you've done to keep a child well has actually done some damage in a subset of children.
Nobody wants to say that we've poisoned an entire generation, almost 2 generations of American children. when you start to understand the implications of how many millions of children are mercury poisoned out there, it's a direct threat to our future. We're going to spend a lifetime caring for what's an ocean, an endless ocean of children who will become adults and old people. And these people who have autism or autism spectrum or even ADD, ADHD, their lives are not going to be very productive. They need medications, they need medical care, they need institutional care. It's not pretty.
It's the most shameful thing ever, that we have devastated our children, that we have put them in harm's way. We chose to do it, and we're choosing not to look at it. What kind of human beings could we be? How shameful is that? And imagine being, someone whose career was based on trying to help society, and it turns out that the evidence starts to come in that you didn't mean to, but it turns out that you were hurting some folks, that you were hurting children, and your whole life you thought you weren't. How do you deal with that shame?
There are a variety of treatments that people have tried for this group of children. And one of the things that I would caution about when we think about children with autism is that these are children with a variety of presentations. We don't talk about autism anymore, we talk about autisms. And one of the things that's really important about that is that not every child is going to respond to the same intervention.
The only way you can have your best chance of recovery is to be in the best possible nutritional status and lead a healthy lifestyle. And I think we all know that Americans don't do that.
In a nationwide study, researchers found that on a typical day, fast food was the main food source for 29 to 38% of children.
When I interview families for the first visit, I'm trying to get a picture of how well the child eats, because I want to get a picture of nutritional intake and nutritional status, and then I do testing to determine exactly what those things are, whether they're mineral deficiencies, vitamin deficiencies, protein deficiencies, and to the best of my ability I correct those, which usually involves healing the gut, because in my practice 80% of children with autism have significant bowel disease.
I'm classically educated. I did my residency at Tufts. I've done 2 fellowships, one at Harvard and one at Tufts. I'm not an alternative practitioner, but once I saw children improve, I couldn't turn my back on it. Once you know the truth, you can't walk away.
When you look at what are the various biomedical treatments for our patients, we basically start with cleaning up the environment, and then we go to cleaning up their diet. There are numerous products in their diet that could be harming them. For instance, hormones in the meat that they're eating, or pesticides and herbicides in their food. But we found one particular type of diet extremely helpful for our patients, and that's a dairy-free and gluten-free diet.
How do her therapists, her teachers, feel that she's doing?
Since the diet, everyone has remarked she's just a new kid.
Today, a small but growing number of doctors are offering their patients natural biomedical treatments for autism, giving parents approaches to recovering their children previously unavailable.
9 months, 10 months away from kindergarten, so we do have some work to do.
Yeah, definitely.
I'm noticing a huge rise in cow milk sensitivity in children. Now, it's not just allergy. It's not the typical hives and wheezing and skin rash. They're more subtle signs. Insomnia, restless sleep, inattention, lack of focus, bedwetting, burping, gas, belly distension, lots of gas, diarrhea, mood disorders, behavioral problems, a lot of these more subtle changes that look more like sensitivities rather than the full-blown allergies.
The casein or gluten-free diets, these are really regarded as the elimination of allergens. That the casein, the protein that's in milk products, the gluten that's in many wheat products, that those particular proteins, some kids are allergic to them. And by allergic, I mean that they have an inflammatory response in their intestine when they have those things in their diet.
It's really important to look at removing all the other junk. So that's one of the first things I really recommend to parents is get out the artificial colors, the artificial flavors, the preservatives, the MSG, all of these compounds that overload their detoxification system and overload and start to impact on the brain and create hyperactivity and inattentiveness. So that's one of the first things I usually recommend is getting all that artificial stuff out of the diet.
Because our knowledge of the biochemistry of what's going on in autism has exploded over the last 10 years, parents are left being scientists using their child as the control in many ways. And I always recommend they start new interventions one at a time and document any positive effects or negative effects.
Parents are discovering treatments. They're finding ways to help their children. They're working together with a whole set of open-minded clinicians. They're finding that therapies doesn't need to be a drug. Maybe you can find a diet, a new kind of diet that will help your child, that certain kinds of foods exacerbate the immune problems that are hurting these children, and the removal of those foods can make them feel better, can make their guts work better, can get rid of diarrhea and constipation, which make them available to learn.
From the medical perspective, at least from our perspective on the GI end, we think diets make a difference for a good number of these children. And it's been our experience that at least any number of children will do better on a milk-free diet or some other dietary restriction.
I make very strong recommendations to parents about changing the diet. And many of these parents look at me and say, "You've got to be kidding me. You want me to take away milk, cheese, yogurt, ice cream, sour cream, soy products, dyes, preservatives, additives, food colorings, MSG. You want me to limit the amount of flour and sugar and cereal and bread, pasta, crackers, cookies, pancakes, waffles, donuts, muffins, pretzels, bagels that they're getting? What are they supposed to eat?" Every parent that's able to go with the changes sees some difference in their children. Again, we don't know the limitations of these children, but little by little, as we peel the layers of an onion, we start to see these children emerge, and we really can get in there and take care of them the way they most individually need. And these children do really well.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Hey, Jax.
After taking Jackson to a biomedical doctor who told us to take like everything out of his diet, everything. And I remember thinking the doctor was crazy. And within 3 days, he had his first normal bowel movement that he had had in over a year.
I can remember my husband urging me to initially go gluten-free, casein-free, GFCF. And no, I'm not going to do that. And it was with much reluctance that I decided to try the diet. He liked bagels and cream cheese and pancakes and macaroni and cheese and pizza. You know, you put gluten and dairy together, and that was his diet. So I pulled everything. And he had 2 weeks of, he literally cried 24 hours a day, and I just didn't give in. And in fact, it was sort of like at my husband, like, I'm not, see how awful he is? And at the 2-week mark, you could just see the fog lift. You could see the eye contact come in. He stopped crying so much.
What's this? A wheel. That's right. A wheel.
He had perfect stool, stopped scripting, graduated occupational therapy, and then we redid a test. No bacteria. He had a bunch of very bad bacteria in his stool. His yeast was off the chart, plus it was just so bad. No yeast, no bacteria. And the levels of intestinal inflammation were 5 times the high end of normal, were down in the normal range. The speech teacher said, what happened? You know, what's going on? All of a sudden he was engaging in speech, and literally he took off like a rocket at that point.
You got to heal the body. Now we buy organic fruits and vegetables. We limit any type of things with dyes in it. The body has already been damaged by so many toxins and mercury and what have you, that these children are so ultra sensitive. You know, and I see it with my own child that if he eats something that's got a lot of chemicals in it or dyes, it sends him off the edge. I think that diet is so important. I mean, you know, I can't say enough about it.
I didn't even know what gluten was, and I went to the store the next day and said, I need to know more about the gluten-free, dairy-free diet. And they suggested that I call this person that had a recovered child, and she talked to me for 2 hours, and she took me through the store and showed me exactly what to do, and in 28 days he was talking. We were in the floor, he had 4 packs of flashcards around him, and I said, Christian, you have to help me clean these up. And he said, Mommy, and he looked at me in the eye, and I said, yes. And he said, lighthouse, wave, ocean. And he named all 40 flashcards. And I was like, thank you, Lord, we're on the right track.
Our diet was pizza, McDonald's, lots of soda, potato chips, dairy, a typical American diet.
A little while, buddy.
Now we're totally organic. We've eliminated all dairy. We eat fish occasionally. We have nuts, seeds, organic fruit, a very healthy diet and lifestyle now.
That's a simple thing. There's no money in a diet. There's no pharmaceutical company that's going to pay for trials or going to pay for a press campaign to advertise, you know, a special diet. But the parents find that these are the things that are most helpful. Most of the things that parents are doing are simple things. They're embracing, you know, a different lifestyle. They're turning away from psychotropic drugs and pharmaceutical interventions. They're looking for ways to restore gastrointestinal health. That's not complicated. It doesn't take expensive therapies or prescriptions, but it takes a change in their way of life.
I mean, there are certainly cases where we've just changed the diet in a child and their autism is gone, or their ADD is just simply gone.
I had a child in my office last week, and he was not even sitting up 6 months ago, and he's 2, almost 3 years old now, and he was running up and down the halls talking back to his mother. And he was nonverbal and not sitting up, and it was all nutrition.
Homeopathy can be an effective approach to treating the overwhelming condition of autism.
What are you looking for, Dr. If we're quiet, maybe we can...
Homeopathic remedies is based on the premise of physics that every substance consists of 2 essential entities. One of material matter, and the other one is its energetic field. So therefore, the process manufacturing homeopathic remedies concerns itself primarily with extracting that energetic component of the original essence. Yet the beauty of it for medical and clinical purposes is that energetic component can elicit a certain and predictable reactions in the body. All right, no, thanks, we're done. Kevin, you're the man.
I want to say thank you, Dr. Epstein.
Thank you. Certainly the most important factors that the parents can address to help their children would be the diet, which definitely has to be sugar-free and even fruit and fruit juice-free initially, white flour-free, avoiding absolutely any foods that might possibly contain antibiotics, food colorings, additives, chemicals of any sort. I would like to emphasize how important it is to limit and reduce or even eliminate exposure to television sets, computers, video games, portable DVD players, and so forth.
All electronic devices in our everyday life, computers, cell phones, televisions, and virtually all modern conveniences emit electromagnetic fields known as EMFs. Electromagnetic fields affect every one of us, throwing our natural electrical rhythms out of kilter. Children's developing brains and delicate central nervous systems are more susceptible to these assaults. A safe and effective approach to removing toxic metals from the body, such as mercury, is chelation therapy. Heavy metals bind to the chelating agent and then are eliminated from the body.
I think of chelation as like peeling an onion. It's slow, steady. It takes 18 months to 2 years to get out these metals. They went in at different points in time. They're small amounts, and they're in different compartments. So when children initially come in, I work to heal the gastrointestinal tract wall, get the child in good nutritional status, add extra minerals to their system, and I find that chelation is a pretty benign part of our treatment once you've prepared the child well to remove those metals.
When you look at the Autism Research Institute website to at least vet the idea of what the parental response is to chelation, somewhere around 2/3 or 3/4 of families who've done chelation do report a benefit.
And that's why I always start with the excretion or the treatment aimed at the excretion and detoxification and release from the body of heavy metals.
He improved greatly with dietary intervention, but not to the point of the removal of the diagnosis. 6 to 8 months of chelation, they removed the diagnosis. Just put us over that.
We've just completed a DMSA treatment study where we give kids with autism a 3-month treatment of DMSA, an FDA-approved medication for treating lead poisoning. And what we found is that just 1 round of DMSA, just 3 days of it, was enough to completely normalize their glutathione levels. And that's real exciting because glutathione is the primary way the body detoxifies mercury and many other toxic metals, many other toxic chemicals in the body, waste products. Glutathione is a very, very important substance in the body.
You're too heavy.
Studies have shown that levels of the antioxidant glutathione are typically about 50% lower in children with autism.
That's not the only antioxidant that they're deficient in, but the glutathione is so important because it helps them detoxify. Again, part of their problem is that they're poisoned. They're overexposed and overwhelmed with toxins, and their bodies have lost the capacity to expel and eliminate these toxins, partly because glutathione is deficient.
I gotta make Jackson stuff. It's calcium, the probiotics. I hide everything in there. Glutathione, another thing he should have naturally but does not. I can't believe he eats this powdery and I don't want it to come out. All right, I think it's ready. Jackson! Gotta eat your bananas.
The first child I treated was a nonverbal 5th grader, and I put him on his normal dietary requirement amount, small daily doses of vitamin A in the natural form, the most concentrated natural form, which is cod liver oil, small daily doses of cod liver oil. And he came back to see me 3 weeks later. I walked in the room, and he was telling his mother, leave me alone, I can get up on this table by myself.
Many of the factors which were beneficial to children with autism act as antioxidants. On this, we have some good published studies.
Mommy has your bananas, okay?
Vitamin B6 and magnesium both exert profound antioxidant effects, and as many as half of the children with autism benefit from B6 and magnesium.
Flour.
The reality is that there are multiple things that can take you to autism. It is autisms. You know, it is very likely environmental toxins, including environmental mercury, including pesticides and PCBs and many of these things that are harmful. We know that they're harmful, and they're, genetically modified foods that have pesticides built into them that aren't supposed to hurt us, but we're learning that, they are.
Even small amounts of these excitotoxins found in many foods can do great damage to the brains of infants and children.
I get them to totally eliminate the excitotoxic food additives. MSG and aspartame should be, in any civilized society, illegal adulterants in food. they significantly increase oxidative stress in brain and are the very worst thing that I can imagine giving a child with autism.
Many children benefit when undergoing hyperbaric treatment. The child is placed in a chamber where 100% pure pressurized oxygen is circulated.
Come on, we're going in this one. It's like the ocean.
This allows the lungs and the skin to absorb more concentrated oxygen in a short period of time, reducing inflammation and improving immune function.
I pictured it like an igloo. And when I saw how small it was, I was like, oh my gosh, I can't believe I have to get in here. And they zip it up. It almost became an adventure. We call it the spaceship, and he says, oh, are we going on the spaceship today? And we'll, get our little portable DVD player, and we'll get in there, and we'll just relax for an hour. And it's really just kind of fun. The improvement has been really incredible. He started a lot more with the W questions, which is a big thing, like what is this, where is this, who's this, who works there? And not to forget that my son is only 3.5, so he really is on target with his age range.
So these treatment strategies, they all tell us that the things that can work in some kids with autism, and it's really, unfortunately, not all kids, but a substantial number, and it's an important clue about the disease. If some kids get better when you do this, you've got to pay attention. You have to say, okay, what is the biochemistry that's helping them?
So, basically, heal the gut, deal with the inflammation, and basically get the methylation, transsulfuration, detoxification pathways in order. And if you just do those three things without getting fancy with everything else, at least 80%, if not more, of these children will make some progress, if not a tremendous amount.
Gotta get it ready to drive, give it a car wash.
These children have unique issues and biological makeups. Their paths to recovery may involve heartbreak and defeat in achieving even the smallest victories. But as evidenced by the stories the families told here, there is much reason for hope.
Okay, I think we're done. What do you think?
Not better yet.
It's not?
Hold on.
What else do we have to spray? Looks good to me.
Until we get the science really directly connected to the parents in some method where we actually take the kids' data, it's coming from them, through science, and gets to the pediatrician that goes, oh, okay, these kids really do have gut issues, and here are the 10 ways that actually work for the kids that we've seen, and they seem to be safe and effective. Okay, that takes intention to learn it, process it through science, publish it, and enforce to others that it actually is true.
Doctors need to teach other doctors how to be more sensitive, and certainly those of us who see large numbers of kids have gotten smarter over the years. When I started seeing this population of children, I was pretty young, out of training. I started seeing kids in the early 1990s, and there was no one to teach me how to look at these children and think about them. And so I had to develop my own sort of intuition about what these children might be saying. But I think every doc, every pediatrician, and every specialist who has to deal with these children has to go through that same evolution and learn what to do to communicate with this group of children.
Can I have that? No? Okay.
As a developmental pediatrician, if I see a new patient, for example, a 4-year-old who's completely nonverbal with autism, if I write a prescription for Risperdal, an antipsychotic that increases their chance for morbid obesity and diabetes, I'm considered mainstream medicine. But if I use B12, do lab tests, figure out their personal metabolic profile, and use nutrients to heal them, I'm considered alternative. I just think the paradigm has to change. We're dealing with such a huge problem right now.
Hopefully the DVD player works, right?
The current recommendation by the American Academy of Pediatrics is if they have autistic-like symptoms at age 1, they should give them psychiatric drugs. Very bad recommendation. None of those drugs are shown to work on autism. None of them are approved for children. And not only that, it's hard to tell at age 1. You can pick up some things, but a lot of the kids that you treat would not have become autistic, and you may damage them by giving them all these psychiatric drugs. So we wait to make sure that we have somebody that's real. But I think you can ameliorate it, but some of the damage is done. The brain forms heavily around 28 weeks, and some of that damage is done. We need to stop doing that as well.
And I think as great as he is, and as far as he has come, I will never know, we will never know the true potential that he actually had. Because I don't think you can kill that many neurons. And I mean, we're always doing something, and I'm always hoping for more and more, and I'll always keep working with him. But it was stolen from us.
I think one of the challenges of the world is to believe recovery is real when there's such a spectrum of realities in recovery. My child is recovered. What does that mean? Is he 100% recovered? Is he, you know, I can't even answer that for my own child because I don't know what he would have been if he wasn't run over by the autism bus.
My pinwheel is working!
We have this one patient who was so severely autistic. He had so many sensory issues that he could not leave the home. The light would bother him, the sound would bother him, driving in the car would bother him. He was 4 years old and he had never had a birthday party because he couldn't stand being around other children. He started on the biomedical approach with nutrient therapies. We cleaned up his diet, casein-free, gluten-free diet. We worked on reestablishing good mineral levels. He was extremely zinc deficient. Now this process takes a while. It took about 2 or 3 years. But now this particular child is in 3rd grade. He's in a mainstream classroom. His teachers never knew he had a diagnosis of autism in the past. The parents haven't even told the school system. He gets no extra school support, and he's thriving. The parents took this particular child back to the Chicago hospital for reevaluation, and they told the parents that he must have been misdiagnosed, that he never had autism in the first place. But they were the ones that diagnosed him.
I've had many patients have their child completely lose the diagnosis, go to mainstream schools, and the teachers don't even know that the child ever had autism. But when they go back to their pediatricians or neurologist, they basically are almost always told it was a spontaneous remission or it was just going to happen anyhow. And the interesting part is it seems that those of us who do what I do have a lot of spontaneous remissions, and if that's what it takes, a lot of spontaneous remissions, fine. I love it because we'll collect them.
The psychiatrist called up to say, I don't know what happened to this child, but whatever happened, it was wonderful. I mean, they see the improvement tremendously. In fact, that child was too bad to get into their school originally. I wrote a letter saying, check him again now that we're treating him. They let him in, and now they're putting him in their advanced high school class. That's the kind of thing that we see.
My favorite shake is bananas, blueberries, rice milk. I mix everything together with green stuff and red stuff. No wheat, no dairy. I like it because it tastes good.
We've done everything 100% natural, and he lost his diagnosis about a year ago. He was getting speech OT and ABA, and the teacher kicked him out. She said one day, "You're done, good job," and said he's recovered, he no longer can fit this diagnosis, and is mainstream school, academically gifted, and a quite social child.
We know in autism from published study now that children with fever have a recession of symptoms of autism. And that's very, very promising. It means that it's wounded but not broken.
It's crazy because you want to be so excited and like rejoice and be so happy because I have these 2, recovered boys. But then to have Jackson, my oldest, who, I look at him and I think, he saved his brothers. It's because of him that his younger brothers are recovered. But he still suffers so much and he still struggles so much. And to not be able to do it for him is heartbreaking. And in a way, it's hard. I almost overlook, I've got 2 recovered boys. You know, I've got 2 recovered boys, but I've got one who's so far away.
That?
Uh-huh.
Sam?
That is so good!
If I'm not addressing the underlying medical issues, then these children do not perform nearly as well as they have potential to do.
On?
Yes?
Sam.
That is so good!
So we uniformly see that when we intervene on these abnormalities, they do so much better.
Ready? Say when we go. Go.
He's recovered. He is healthy again. He's happy.
Let's go.
He communicates with us. He tells me he loves me. He hugs me. He plays with his sister. He reads. He's intelligent. And he's happy.
We're just thrilled that we have managed to recover our son. I can't imagine what the alternative would be if we hadn't tried these things.
How do you spell your name?
Jack.
Yeah, how do you spell it?
I got all Student of the Weeks. And I'm very, very happy because I have friends now. My teacher said that I was doing magnificent progress. I like my pitching. I got a strong hand of mine.
There is hope, and Jonathan has proof. Follow, you have nothing to lose. To try what Jonathan has, and us as a family has tried, a whole new life approach. Not just a diet, but a way of life. And you'll see an improvement because we are living proof that it works.
Me and my wife both believe that Jonathan's going to be fine. We believe through the diet that he's on, through the protein shakes, through the chelation therapy that he's been through the vitamin, to eating organic foods, no dairy products. We believe Jonathan's going to be fine. We don't see any problems with Jonathan's future.
He's about 6'1". His abilities are probably academically about it like a 5-6-year-old. And if you've been around 6-year-olds, they're really happy, delightful kids. So we fortunately have got that. He's a very happy boy.
Sometimes I just want to say, okay, this is it. This is their life. You know, autism is a part of our life. I can just find a program for them and just accept it. And I just can't go there. There's something in me that just won't let me do it. You know, as soon as I think that I want to go there and give up, I say, okay, but, you know, let me get on the internet. I'm sure I'll find something else.
Now he's playing t-ball and running around and playing piano and involved in competitive sports. Not only is he social and looks wonderful and just adorable and always the person that'll run over on the play yard when somebody falls down, but he's also, you know, being a boy and doing, you know, boy stuff.
I see him blossoming and being the full person he was meant to be. And it was because I knew inside there was something we could do about the problem. And I never gave up.
It feels a lot better. I can do a lot more active things. I can run around. I can play sports. I can play around, mess around with my dad, play around with my dog, and have fun. I love it. It's awesome. Some things in the world say that you shouldn't do hyperbarics, you shouldn't do IV. But sometimes you're just gonna have to rebel against the world and just do the things that you think is right.
Yeah, I used to feel like my head, I couldn't even think or do anything right because I had it.
Lights! Camera! Action! It's flying over your head and
With a
kid that they thought would never talk and was mentally retarded. I think those worries are gone, thankfully, luckily. But there's always something to worry about.
Hey, stop touching me.
Sorry.
I have many children who've recovered enough that they are fully mainstreamed in school. Certainly, they still have personality characteristics that would make them be considered a little odd or eccentric, but they function very, very highly.
The truth speaks for itself. My son would not be what he is today if we hadn't done a different route, and I can tell you that honestly.
Maybe Superman's in there. He's a little midget guy, a little tiny guy.
No, he isn't.
I see him in there.
He came in one day when I was in the kitchen, and he told me he loved me, which, I mean, to have an autistic child who can't talk and then to tell you that they love you, it's just like, oh my gosh, you know, it's like, you know, there are miracles that happen.
Yeah, there's no Superman in there.
No? She didn't know that.
Many of those children are in regular kindergarten, have friends, get invited to birthday parties, and are in the top reading groups. And when they come to me at nonverbal at 2 and 3.
My son is doing wonderful now. I mean, he's just made remarkable improvement from being 4 and no language and smearing poop on the wall to doing grade level work, going to a private school, you know, has friends, no supports.
And after 3 years of multiple interventions, including behavior and biomedical, he no longer garners the label of autism.
It always makes me sad to say goodbye to a patient, but I'm also filled with joy because I know I've gotten them well. They're out of spectrum and they're thought of as normal children. And so I like that.
We ran into somebody the other day and I told them that my son's completely recovered from autism. And the response was, that's not possible. So the number one thing that I would like people to know is that recovery from autism is absolutely possible.
Beep, 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 beep. Oh no, 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 you're tickling me.
He's just great, and I'm incredibly grateful.